I told you, do not bring that to my party.
Gerald Anderson's voice sliced across the ballroom. 300 guests went silent.
Dad, she's my wife. Your wife? A broke black nobody from the Bronx. A welfare case who cleans bedpans. You threw away everything I built for this.
Patrice stood still.
Mr. Anderson.
Shut your mouth! You don't belong here. Ghetto trash in a borrowed dress.
Patrice's hands trembled. She didn't look away.
Get this filth out!
Gerald pointed at the door.
Tyler, you leave with her. You're not my son. No money, no name. Nothing!
Tyler took Patrice's hand.
Then I have no son.
But no one in that mansion knew. A car had just pulled into the driveway. And everything Gerald Anderson had built was about to collapse. 6 hours before the gala, Patrice Shaw clocked out of a 12-hour shift at Mercy General Hospital. The pediatric ward smelled like antiseptic and apple juice. Fluorescent lights hummed above scuffed linoleum. A toddler with pneumonia had finally stopped crying around 4 in the morning, and Patrice had been the one holding his small hand until he fell asleep. That was the job. Not glamorous, not lucrative, but entirely hers. She walked to the parking lot in faded scrubs and worn sneakers. Her Honda Civic sat between two newer cars, a dent on the passenger door she kept meaning to fix. She tossed her bag in the back seat and pressed her forehead against the steering wheel. The engine ticked in the summer heat. Her phone buzzed. Tyler. Babe, I need to tell you something. She already knew. That careful tone he only used when his father was involved. He said I can't come, didn't he? Silence. Then, he told me if you show up, he'll make a scene in front of every single person there. Patrice exhaled slowly. She had met Gerald Anderson exactly 3 times. The first time, he looked through her like glass. The second, he told Tyler, right in front of her, that this little phase will pass. The third, he sent a check for $50,000 with a typed note. For your trouble, please move on quietly. She never cashed it. She kept the note in her bedside drawer as a reminder of who Gerald Anderson really was. Tyler, it's fine. I'll stay home with Zoe. No. His voice sharpened. You're my wife. You have every right to be there. Your father doesn't see it that way. My father doesn't see a lot of things. That's his problem, not ours. Patrice stared through the windshield. A photo of Zoe was tucked into the sun visor. Gap-tooth grin, braids with pink beads. Brenda Collins, her closest friend, was already watching Zoe for the night. Tyler, I really don't want to cause problems. You never cause problems. He does, every time. A pause. I bought you a dress. It's on the bed. Please come with me tonight. She found the dress an hour later. Navy blue, simple, elegant. It fit perfectly. She stood before the mirror. A tarnished gold military dog tag hung on a thin chain below her collarbone. Engraved initials, C.S. She tucked it inside the neckline like she always did. Patrice never talked about her father. When people asked, she said her mother passed when she was 19 and her father was retired. Both technically true. Her mother, Grace Shaw, had been a celebrated civil rights attorney. Her father retired from the United States Army as a 4-star general and currently served as chairman of Shaw Northfield Industries, the largest privately held defense contractor in America. But Patrice had decided long ago to build her life on her own terms. No shortcuts, no connections. Nobody would ever say she hadn't earned what she had. So she drove her dented Civic to a mansion worth more than she would make in 10 lifetimes and walked through the front door with her chin up. Meanwhile, Gerald Anderson was on his 3rd bourbon of the evening. The Anderson Capital Annual Gala was his masterpiece. 300 guests filled the grand ballroom of his Greenwich estate. Senators, hedge fund managers, defense contractors. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light across white orchid centerpieces. A string quartet played Vivaldi by the marble staircase. Waitstaff in black vests moved through the crowd with champagne on silver trays. Gerald greeted each guest with handshakes calibrated to rank. Firm for equals, brief for subordinates, non-existent for anyone beneath his attention. His wife Victoria glided through the room in a cream gown, whispering instructions to the event coordinator. Everything was flawless. Everything was under control. Then he looked toward the entrance. Patrice walked in. Tyler beside her, hand on the small of her back. The navy dress catching the chandelier light. Gerald's glass stopped midway to his lips, his jaw locked. Victoria reached for his sleeve. Gerald, not here. He was already moving. 300 guests, all watching, and Gerald walked straight toward the woman he despised, ready to destroy her in front of every one of them. What he did not know, what his guest coordinator had failed to mention, was that the last name on tonight's VIP list had confirmed just 20 minutes ago. Cornelius Shaw, Chairman, Shaw Northfield Industries. Table 1, the ballroom had been designed to impress. Vaulted ceilings with hand-painted pastoral scenes, Italian marble floors polished until they reflected the chandeliers like still water. The scent of orchids and cologne hung in the warm air. 300 of the most powerful people in the Northeast stood with champagne in their hands. Every single one of them watched Gerald Anderson cross that floor. His shoes clicked against the marble, sharp, deliberate. Like a countdown no one could stop. Tyler saw him coming. He stepped in front of Patrice. His hand found her elbow, not hiding her, shielding her. Dad, before you say anything, I told you. Gerald's voice was low, almost a whisper, but designed to carry. She was not welcome tonight. I gave you one instruction, and you defied me. In my own house, at my own event, in front of every person I know. She's my wife. She has every right. Right? Gerald's voice climbed, controlled, surgical. She has no rights in this house. No rights in this family, no rights in this room. She has no rights anywhere near me. He turned to Patrice, looked her up and down, slowly, the way a man inspects something he's decided to throw away. Nice dress. Who paid for it? Because you certainly didn't. Not on what they pay nurses at a public hospital. Patrice met his eyes. I'm not here to fight with you, Mr. Anderson. You're not here at all, that's the point. Gerald tugged each cuff with practiced precision. You were told this event is for people of a certain caliber. People with education, people with breeding, people with something to contribute to society, and you walked in anyway. Like you belong among these people. She does belong. Tyler's voice cracked. She belongs in the Bronx. Gerald raised one finger. In a welfare line. A second finger. Anywhere on earth except next to my son in front of people who matter. A third finger jabbed the air with each word. Murmurs rippled through the nearest guests. A woman in diamonds whispered behind her hand. 2 men near the bar exchanged uneasy glances. A couple near the quartet pretended to study their programs. No one intervened. No one stepped forward. 300 people, and not a single spine among them. That was the thing about rooms full of powerful people. They were experts at watching other people suffer in silence. Gerald reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document. Cream paper. Heavy stock. He held it up between 2 fingers like a verdict already decided. Since he can't take a hint, let me make this official. He placed it on the nearest cocktail table. White linen, an abandoned champagne flute sweating beside it. postnuptial agreement. My attorneys drafted it this morning. 32 pages. He tapped the cover. It states that you, Patrice Shaw or whatever your name was before you latched onto my son, waive all claims to Anderson family assets. Every trust, every property, every account, every dollar this family has ever earned. Patrice looked at the document. She did not touch it. Any child from a previous relationship gets zero. Not a cent. Now or ever. You're talking about my daughter. Something behind Patrice's eyes went very still, very sharp. I'm talking about protecting 3 generations of Anderson legacy from someone who showed up with nothing and expects everything in return. Tyler grabbed the document, flipped through the pages. His face cycled through white, then red, then something much darker that had no name. There's a clause saying Patrice needs your written approval to attend any family event. Any event. Christmas, birthdays, funerals. From who? From me. Another says if she's deemed publicly embarrassing, the marriage can be annulled with 0 compensation. She gets nothing. Who decides what's embarrassing? I do. Tyler stared at his father. His hands shook with rage. This isn't a legal document. It's a cage. It's a choice. Gerald clasped his hands behind his back. She signs tonight, she stays. Back table, eats quietly, keeps her mouth shut, pretends she belongs. In exchange, she gives up every legal claim to the Anderson name. He leaned close to Tyler, close enough for the bourbon to hit his face, close enough that only Tyler could hear the next words. You think I'm bluffing? I've already called the bank. 1 phone call and your accounts are frozen by morning. Then louder for everyone. Or she doesn't sign, and you lose everything. The trust, $800 million, Tyler, gone. Your VP position, gone. The apartment I own, gone. Your inheritance, your future, your name. Everything you have ever known. He stepped back and spread his arms, addressing the entire room now. Let me be clear for everyone here tonight. My son has chosen to marry a broke, uneducated black woman from public housing who has nothing to offer this family except shame and embarrassment. I want every person in this room to see the judgment my son has demonstrated. The words hit the room like a slap across the face. Guests stared at their shoes. One woman covered her mouth. A senator found his phone suddenly fascinating. A waiter froze mid-step, champagne trembling on his tray. The string quartet stopped playing. The last note wavered in the air and died. Nobody spoke. 300 people in designer gowns and tailored suits stood there and said absolutely nothing. The silence was thick, deliberate, and profoundly cowardly. It filled the room like smoke. Patrice stood still. Fingers pressed into her palms hard enough to leave marks, but her face gave nothing away. She had learned long ago, in hospital hallways, in waiting rooms, in every room where someone decided she didn't belong before she opened her mouth, that crying in front of people who want to see you break is the moment they win. She would not cry. Not here. Not for him. Not in front of these people who would tell the story at brunch tomorrow. Mr. Anderson. Her voice cut through the silence, quiet and clear. I graduated magna cum laude from Columbia School of Nursing. I have worked pediatric critical care for 6 years. I have never taken a dollar from your family, never asked for anything from anyone in this room, and I did not come here tonight to be humiliated. Gerald smirked, slow and deliberate. And yet here you are, being humiliated. Funny how that works. Guests near the back laughed. Short, nervous laughs, but laughs. The sound bounced off marble and landed on Patrice like thrown stones. Each laugh a small, ugly choice someone made in that moment. Tyler ripped the agreement in half. The sharp sound of tearing paper cut through the ballroom and silenced everything instantly. "We're done." Gerald's smirk vanished. "Excuse me?" "We're done." Tyler dropped the torn pages on the marble floor. "I'm not signing. She's not signing. And I am done pretending you are anything other than what you are." Gerald's face went from composed to furious. A thick vein pulsed at his temple. His fists clenched at his sides. "You're choosing her over everything I built for you." "I'm choosing decency over you." The room held its breath. Gerald nodded slowly. He turned to face 300 frozen guests one final time. "Then hear me clearly. As of this moment, you are no longer my son. Removed from the family trust entirely. Terminated from Anderson Capital, effective immediately. Vacate the apartment by end of week. You will never set foot in this house again. I will forget I ever had a son." He looked at Patrice, eyes cold and flat like river stones. "Take him. You wanted him? Now you have him. With absolutely nothing." Victoria stood near the staircase, champagne untouched, face a porcelain mask. She watched her only son be disowned in front of 300 people and did not move, did not speak, did not even blink. Dorothy Mitchell, Gerald's older sister, sat at a corner table. Tears ran silently down her cheeks. She gripped her napkin until her knuckles went white, opened her mouth to speak, closed it, and slowly looked away. Tyler took Patrice's hand, fingers locked together tightly. He straightened his shoulders and turned toward the exit without a single word. Patrice walked beside him, back straight, chin up, the navy dress catching the warm chandelier light one final time as they passed through the silent crowd. 10 steps from the door, Gerald called out, loud enough for every person in the ballroom. "You'll be back. When the money runs out and she shows you what she really is, you'll come crawling back. They always do." Tyler didn't turn around. But what Gerald did not realize, could not have known, was that at that exact moment, a black Cadillac Escalade with government plates was pulling through the iron front gate, and the man in the back seat had just received a phone call that changed absolutely everything. Tyler and Patrice didn't make it to the door. They were 3 steps away when 2 men in dark suits appeared in front of them. Private security. Gerald's own private security team. Arms folded, faces blank. Built like concrete walls stuffed into tailored jackets. Neither of them looked at Patrice or Tyler. They just stood there, blocking the exit like this was routine. "Nobody leaves until I say so." Gerald's voice came from behind them, calm again, almost pleasant. That was somehow much worse than the shouting. "I'm not finished." Tyler turned slowly. His shoulders were rigid. "Yeah, you are." "Sit down, Tyler." Gerald pulled out his phone and held it up. "One call. That's all it takes. One call and I cancel every credit card in your name. One call and your bank account, the one you think is yours but is actually linked to the family trust, is frozen before you reach the parking lot." He dialed, held the phone to his ear. Never broke eye contact with Tyler, not once. He wanted his son to watch. "Richard, it's Gerald. Freeze Tyler Anderson's access to all trust-linked accounts, effective immediately." "Yes, all of them. I'll send written confirmation within the hour." He hung up, slid the phone back into his breast pocket with 2 fingers, and smiled the kind of smile that had no warmth in it whatsoever. "There, now you have nothing. No apartment, no car, no credit cards, no money for gas to drive that little Honda back to the Bronx." He looked at Patrice. "Congratulations. You married a penniless man. How does that feel?" You came here with nothing, and now you're leaving with the same. Tyler's fist clenched. Patrice put her hand on his arm. A gentle pressure, firm but calm. A reminder that said everything without a single word. Don't. Not like this. Not here. Let us leave, Gerald. Patrice's voice was low and even. Gerald ignored her completely. He turned back to the room and raised his glass. I'd like to propose a toast. He waited until a few nervous guests raised their glasses, most out of reflex, not support. To my former son, Tyler, and his beautiful bride. May they enjoy their new life in poverty together. I hear the Bronx is lovely this time of year. Nobody drank. Not one sip. But nobody put their glass down either. The glasses just hung there in the air, suspended between cowardice and conscience. Harold Whitfield, Gerald's general counsel, stood near the bar with his phone in his hand. He had been reading something on the screen for the past 2 minutes. His face had gone the color of old paper. He looked up at Gerald, then at the front door, then back at his phone. He loosened his tie with one finger, swallowed hard, and said absolutely nothing. A young woman in a black cocktail dress, one of the junior associates from Anderson Capital, caught Patrice's eye from across the room. She mouthed 2 words. I'm sorry. Then she looked away quickly, because looking away was easier than actually doing something about it. That was 300 people in one single room. Senators, executives, lawyers, titans of industry. And the bravest thing any of them could manage was a silent apology mouthed from 20 feet away. Gerald wasn't done. He never was. Men like Gerald Anderson didn't stop when they had won. They stopped when they had destroyed. He walked to the cocktail table where the torn postnuptial agreement lay in pieces. He picked up the halves, held them up for the room to see. You see this? My son just tore up his future. 32 pages of protection for this family, ripped apart for a woman who brings nothing to the table except a nursing certificate and someone else's child. He dropped the pieces on the floor and stepped on them, ground them under his heel against the marble. That's what your marriage is worth to me. That's what your choice is worth. Less than the paper it was printed on. Victoria finally moved. She crossed the room to Gerald, her heels clicking in the silence, and placed one hand on his arm. Not to stop him, to stand beside him. To show the room exactly where she stood. Tyler, darling. Victoria's voice was smooth as cream and twice as cold. Your father is doing this because he loves you. One day you'll understand that. Tyler looked at his mother, really looked at her, and something behind his eyes broke. Not anger, not sadness, but the final snapping of a thread that had been stretched too thin for too many years. You stood there, Tyler said quietly. You stood there and watched him say all of that. Every word. And you didn't say a thing. Not one word to defend the woman your son loves. Not one word to defend your granddaughter. Victoria blinked. For a fraction of a second, something flickered across her face. Then it was gone. The mask slid back into place. Family is about sacrifice, Tyler. Sometimes the sacrifice is yours. No, Mom. Sometimes the sacrifice is your soul. Tyler turned his back on both of them. He walked toward the door, Patrice beside him. The security guards looked at Gerald. Gerald considered it for a moment, then waved one hand dismissively. A king granting permission to the banished. Let them go. They stepped through the heavy oak doors and into the foyer. The air was noticeably cooler here, almost startling after the suffocating heat of the ballroom. The noise of the ballroom faded behind heavy oak doors. Crystal wall sconces cast soft light across a Persian rug and a portrait of Gerald Anderson that hung above the staircase. Oil on canvas, 6 feet tall, a monument to his own self-importance. Patrice leaned against the wall. She closed her eyes. Her hands were still shaking. The tremor ran from her fingertips up through her wrists and into her shoulders. Adrenaline. Humiliation. The bone-deep kind of exhaustion that comes from holding yourself perfectly together in front of people who were actively, deliberately trying to tear you apart. Tyler stood beside her. He didn't speak for a long moment. When he finally did, his voice was raw and broken. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Patrice. I thought if they just met you, if they just saw who you really are, they saw exactly who I am." Patrice opened her eyes. "That's the problem. They looked at me and saw exactly what they wanted to see. Nothing I said in there would have changed a single mind." Tyler pressed his forehead against the wall. "I have nothing now. He actually did it. He cut me off." "You have me." Patrice's voice was soft. "And I have you. And we have Zoe. That's not nothing, Tyler. That's everything that matters." A long, heavy silence settled over them both. Then Tyler looked at her. "Should I call your dad?" Patrice hesitated. She touched the dog tag through the fabric of her dress. CS, her father's initials, warm from her skin. She had spent her entire adult life keeping her father's identity separate from her own. She had never once used his name to open a door, win an argument, or impress anyone. She had needed to know that everything she had was earned, that no one could ever say she was handed anything. But tonight was different. Tonight wasn't about impressing anyone. Tonight, a man had publicly degraded her, her daughter, her marriage, and her husband, and 300 people had watched and done nothing. Tonight was not about pride anymore. It was about something much bigger than pride. It was about justice. "I'll call him myself." Patrice reached into the small clutch she had been gripping all night and pulled out her phone. Her fingers were still trembling, but her voice would not be. 1 ring. 2 rings. Then a deep, calm voice. "Hey, baby girl." "Dad!" Her voice cracked for the first time all night. Just that one word, just his name. And everything she had held together for the past hour threatened to come undone. "I know," Cornelia said. "Tyler called me 20 minutes ago. I'm already here." "What?" "I'm in the driveway, sweetheart. I've been sitting here for 5 minutes trying to decide whether to come in politely or come in like a 4-star general." Patrice almost laughed. Almost. "And what did you decide?" "I decided I'm going to walk in there as a father. Because that's worse." The line went dead. Patrice looked at Tyler. Tyler looked at Patrice. Neither of them spoke. From outside, through the heavy front doors, they heard the sound of a car door closing. Then footsteps on gravel. Slow. Measured. Completely unhurried. The footsteps of a man who had walked into rooms far more dangerous than this one and walked out every single time. The front doorbell rang. One long, slow, deliberate chime that echoed through the marble foyer. And in the ballroom, Gerald Anderson was still smiling. Still performing. Still basking in the glow of his own cruelty, surrounded by 300 people who were too afraid to tell him he had just made the worst mistake of his life. He had no idea who was standing on the other side of that door. But he was about to find out. Very soon. Patrice opened the front door. Cornelia Shaw stepped inside. He was 60 years old, 6'3", and built like a man who had never stopped training. Silver hair, close cropped. A tailored charcoal suit. A small polished American flag pin on his lapel. No jewelry. No flash, just presence. The kind that made rooms go quiet without a single word. He looked at Patrice first, cupped her face with both hands and kissed her forehead. "You okay, baby girl?" Patrice nodded. If she spoke now, she would break. She wasn't ready to break yet. Cornelius looked at Tyler, extended his hand, held the grip an extra second. "You did the right thing in there. I'm proud of you, son." Tyler's eyes went glassy. He just nodded. Words weren't enough, and he knew it. Cornelius straightened his jacket, adjusted the flag pin on his lapel, looked toward the ballroom doors. The muffled sound of 300 voices filtered through the heavy wood. "Which one is he? You can't miss him." "Let's go correct that." His voice carried the calm of a man who had made decisions that changed the course of wars. This was nothing. He pushed open the ballroom doors. Both of them. Wide. The sound cut through every conversation like a blade. 300 heads turned. The string quartet stopped mid-note. Cornelius Shaw walked into that ballroom the way a 4-star general walks into a Pentagon briefing. Unhurried, deliberate. Every step communicating one thing: I am not here to ask permission. Gerald was near the bar, bourbon refreshed, laughing with a hedge fund manager about something that wasn't funny. He glanced toward the entrance. His laugh died in his throat. He recognized the face immediately. Not from family photos, not from Patrice. From the Pentagon Procurement Gala 2 years ago, where Gerald had waited 45 minutes just to shake this man's hand. From the cover of Defense Weekly. Shaw Northfield secures $6.2 billion in federal contracts. From the framed photograph in Harold Whitfield's office. Cornelius Shaw beside the Secretary of Defense, both men holding the kind of power that made Gerald's fortune look like pocket change. Gerald's face drained of color in stages. First the bourbon flush faded, then the confidence left his jaw, then his eyes went wide with the first horrible spark of recognition. Cornelius crossed the floor. The crowd parted without being asked. They didn't know who he was. But every person in that room knew what authority looked like when it walked toward you. He stopped directly in front of Gerald, close enough that Gerald had to look up to meet his eyes. "Gerald." The voice was deep, unhurried, and carried to every corner of the silent room. "We've met before. Twice. Once at the Pentagon Gala, where you waited 45 minutes to introduce yourself to me. Once when your office called mine 3 times in 1 week begging for a contract extension." Gerald's mouth opened. Nothing came out. His bourbon hand trembled visibly. A drop of whiskey slid over the rim and landed on his polished shoe. Harold Whitfield by the bar closed his eyes. He had known for 20 minutes. A Google alert. Shaw Northfield chairman confirms attendance at Anderson Capital Gala. He hadn't warned Gerald. Lawyers always know when to build distance from a sinking ship. Cornelius continued. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The absolute silence of 300 people did the work for him. "My daughter. The woman you called ghetto trash. The woman you called filth. The woman you ordered removed from this room is Patrice Elaine Shaw. My only child. A magna cum laude graduate of Columbia. A pediatric critical care nurse who has saved more lives in 1 year than everyone in this room combined. And the most decent, courageous human being I have ever known." He paused. Let every word settle like stones dropping into still water. She chose not to use my name. She chose to build her life without my money, my connections, or my reputation. She wanted to earn everything on her own terms, and she did. Every single thing she has, she earned with her own hands. Cornelius reached into his jacket, pulled out a single business card, cream-colored, heavy stock. He placed it on the bar in front of Gerald with 2 steady fingers. Gerald looked down at the card. Cornelius A. Shaw, Chairman, Shaw Northfield Industries. The same Shaw Northfield that held a $3.2 billion defense contract with Anderson Capital Holdings. The contract representing 40% of Anderson Capital's annual revenue. The contract that, if pulled, would collapse Gerald's company like a house of cards in a hurricane. Gerald's knees buckled. He grabbed the edge of the bar with both hands to keep himself standing. The bourbon glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the marble floor. Sharp and final, like a gavel coming down on a verdict that could never be appealed. 300 guests stood in absolute silence. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Nobody dared. The room smelled of spilled whiskey and the unmistakable scent of a man's world falling apart. And Cornelius Shaw stood perfectly still, watching Gerald Anderson realize, in front of every single person who mattered to him, that the woman he had just tried to destroy was the daughter of the man who held his entire world in the palm of his hand. The silence lasted 6 full seconds. In a room of 300 people, 6 seconds feels like an hour. Then Gerald moved. He had to. Standing still meant accepting what had just happened. He released the bar, straightened his jacket with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, tried to reassemble the mask. The CEO mask, the patriarch mask, but it wouldn't fit anymore. It had shattered alongside the bourbon glass. General Shaw. Gerald's voice came out thin, reedy, a voice no one in that room had ever heard from Gerald Anderson before. Small, uncertain, afraid. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. I had no idea. No idea? Cornelius didn't blink. You had no idea she was someone's daughter? Or you assumed no one who mattered would ever find out how you treat people you consider beneath you? The things I said, they were in the heat of the moment. Family emotions run high. You drafted a 32-page legal document this morning. Cornelius's voice was quiet and devastating. You positioned security at the exits. You froze your son's accounts with a phone call. That is not the heat of the moment. That is premeditation. The room was so quiet you could hear ice melting in abandoned drinks. Gerald tried again. He stepped forward, one hand extended in a gesture that was meant to look collegial, but came across as desperate. Cornelius, surely we can discuss this privately. There's no reason for this to affect our business. Shaw Northfield and Anderson Capital have a long, productive history. You're right. We do. Cornelius looked at the hand. He did not take it. He let the hand hang in the air between them, unanswered. And that history ends tonight, unless I hear something in the next 60 seconds that convinces me you are not the man you just showed this room you are. Gerald's hand dropped. His eyes darted around the ballroom, searching for an ally. He found nothing. 300 faces looked back with expressions ranging from pity to disgust. Not one person stepped forward. Victoria walked to Gerald's side. She turned to Cornelius with a practiced smile. General Shaw, perhaps we can arrange a meeting next week. Once cooler heads, Mrs. Anderson. Cornelius cut her off. I watched you stand by a staircase and say nothing while your husband humiliated my daughter and disowned your son. Do not speak to me about cooler heads. Victoria's smile crumbled like wet plaster. Cornelius pulled out his phone, dialed. The room heard every word. Andrew, it's Cornelius. Full review of every Shaw Northfield contract with Anderson Capital. Every subcontract, every clause, every renewal. Board briefing on my desk by 9 a.m. Monday. He hung up and looked at Gerald. 48 hours. Resign as CEO. Issue a public apology, a real one, not whatever your lawyers draft at 3 in the morning. Step away from every Sean Northfield contract personally. If I don't see movement by Monday noon, my legal team handles the rest. He paused. And Gerald? My legal team doesn't lose. Gerald's legs folded. He sank into the nearest banquet chair. He put his head in his hands, his shoulders curved inward like a building beginning to collapse from the inside. For the first time all night, Gerald Anderson had nothing to say. Harold Whitfield was already moving. He gathered his briefcase, crossed the room, and positioned himself next to Tyler in the foyer. Physical distance from Gerald. Professional distance. The kind of repositioning that said everything about where power had shifted. Tyler, Harold said quietly, we should talk Monday. Just us. Tyler nodded. Dorothy Mitchell rose from her corner table. She walked to Patrice, tears still on her face, and took both her hands. I'm sorry. Dorothy's voice broke. I should have said something. Years ago. Tonight. Every time. Patrice squeezed her hands. Thank you, Dorothy. The first act of genuine decency from an Anderson all night. It had taken a catastrophe to produce it. Cornelius put his arm around Patrice. Tyler stood on her other side. The three of them walked toward the front door together. Behind them, the ballroom stayed frozen. Gerald slumped in a chair too small for a man whose empire had just become too large to save. Victoria stood alone, clutching her pearls like a life raft. And 300 guests reached for their phones, not to help, but to tell the story. The first text was sent at 9:47 p.m. By midnight, the whole world would know. It started with the texts, then the tweets, then the audio. Someone at the gala, nobody ever confirmed who, had been recording on their phone from the moment Gerald pointed his finger at Patrice. The audio was shaky, the background clinking with champagne glasses, but every word was perfectly clear. Gerald's voice, sharp and unmistakable, calling Patrice ghetto trash, calling her filth, ordering her removed from the room, disowning his own son in front of 300 witnesses. The clip hit social media at 11:14 p.m. By 2 in the morning, it had 6 million views. By sunrise, it was playing on every major news network in America. Cable news ran it on loop. The headline that stuck came from Nathan Brooks, an investigative journalist who had been chasing corporate discrimination stories for a decade. His piece ran in the Washington Herald at 7 a.m. Monday morning. Anderson Capital CEO caught on audio, racist tirade against son's wife. But she's the daughter of defense giant Cornelius Shaw. The article didn't just cover the gala. Brooks had been working sources inside Anderson Capital for months, and the audio gave him the opening he needed. Former employees came forward, 6 of them, all black, all with stories. One described being passed over for promotion 3 times, despite having the highest performance metrics in her entire department. Another described Gerald referring to the company's diversity initiative as window dressing for the liberals during a closed-door board meeting. A third provided internal emails, actual company emails, in which Gerald instructed HR to prioritize cultural fit, which was code for something very specific and very illegal. The 2018 discrimination lawsuit resurfaced. It had been settled quietly for an undisclosed sum with a strict non-disclosure agreement. But the audio from the gala made the NDA legally questionable, and 2 original plaintiffs announced they were prepared to testify again. Anderson Capital's stock opened Monday morning down 14%. By close of trading Tuesday, it had dropped 22%. Institutional investors, pension funds, university endowments, sovereign wealth funds, began pulling out. Not because they suddenly developed a conscience, but because toxicity is bad for quarterly returns. The board of directors called an emergency session Tuesday evening. 9 members voted to demand Gerald's immediate resignation. 2 abstained. Both were Gerald's personal appointees, and even they couldn't bring themselves to vote in his defense. The resolution passed unanimously on the second ballot. Shaw Northfield Industries issued a formal statement Wednesday morning. 3 paragraphs written with the precision of a legal weapon. Shaw Northfield Industries is conducting a comprehensive review of all contractual relationships with Anderson Capital Holdings. We do not engage in business partnerships with organizations whose leadership demonstrates conduct incompatible with our core values of equality, dignity, and inclusion. Further decisions will be announced following the completion of our review. 3 other major defense clients followed Shaw Northfield within 48 hours. Total contracts frozen, $5.1 billion. Anderson Capital's entire operational model depended on those contracts. Without them, the company wasn't just shrinking. It was hemorrhaging from every artery. Gerald's personal attorney, Douglas Crawford, advised him to resign immediately. Gerald resisted for 24 hours. He sat in his study in the Greenwich mansion, calling board members one by one, trying to negotiate, threaten, or charm his way back to control. Nobody answered. Every single call went to voicemail. The silence on the other end of those phone lines was louder than anything Gerald had ever heard. Victoria finally broke through Wednesday night. She walked into his study at 11 p.m. in her robe and said 5 words that ended the argument. "If you don't resign, we lose everything. The estate, the accounts, the name, all of it, Gerald." He resigned Thursday morning. The public apology was recorded in his home office. Navy suit, flag pin, a detail that did not go unnoticed, given that Cornelius Shaw had worn the same configuration 3 nights earlier at the gala. Gerald read the statement from a teleprompter with the enthusiasm of a man reading his own obituary. "I deeply regret the hurtful and inappropriate remarks I made at the Anderson Capital annual gala. My words do not reflect the values of Anderson Capital or the Anderson family. I take full responsibility and am committed to learning and growth." The internet responded the way the internet always responds to insincere apologies. Comment sections were merciless. "He's sorry he got caught. This isn't remorse, it's damage control. Learning and growth? Sir, you're 62. A meme of Gerald's face superimposed on a collapsing building circulated for weeks. The EEOC opened a formal investigation into Anderson Capital's hiring and promotion practices the following Monday. A class action lawsuit was filed 2 weeks later by 6 former black employees. Allegations: systemic racial discrimination in hiring, promotion, compensation, and workplace culture spanning more than a decade. Damages sought: $85 million. Gerald was quietly removed from 3 corporate boards. 2 nonprofits asked him to step down from their advisory councils. His country club membership was placed under review. In Greenwich, the polite equivalent of being told to never come back. Tyler was offered the interim CEO position by the board. Conditions: a complete overhaul of diversity and inclusion policies, an independent audit of hiring practices, and establishment of a minority business incubator. Tyler accepted on one condition of his own: that Patrice would have no involvement in the decision. He wanted to earn it the same way she had earned everything in her life, on her own terms. Patrice went back to work at Mercy General the following Monday. She clocked in at 6 a.m. She put on her scrubs. She held a 9-year-old boy's hand until he fell back asleep after surgery. When a reporter called the nurses' station and asked for a comment, Patrice said 7 words that became their own headline. "My patients need me. That hasn't changed." Cornelius established the Grace Shaw Foundation, named after Patrice's mother, with a $10 million endowment. The foundation provided scholarships for single mothers pursuing careers in healthcare and law. Patrice helped design the application process, but took no public credit. The foundation's website listed her only as advisory board member. Tyler and Patrice renewed their vows on a Saturday afternoon in October. Small ceremony, 30 guests, a garden in Westchester, not a ballroom in Greenwich. Cornelius walked Patrice down the aisle. No Anderson family members were invited, except Dorothy Mitchell, who arrived early carrying a handwritten apology letter and a stuffed elephant for Zoe. Zoe was the flower girl. She scattered petals down the aisle with intense concentration, then turned to the guests and announced, "My grandpa is a general, and my mom saves kids." Nobody corrected her. She was absolutely right on both counts. 6 months later, here's where everyone landed. Gerald Anderson resigned as CEO of Anderson Capital Holdings and never returned to the corner office he had occupied for 23 years. The class action lawsuit settled for $62 million, the largest racial discrimination settlement in the defense industry that year. The EEOC investigation resulted in a consent decree requiring mandatory anti-discrimination training, an independent diversity compliance officer, and quarterly federal reports for 5 years. Gerald's net worth dropped from $2.1 billion to roughly $800 million after the stock crash, settlement, and legal fees. He moved out of Greenwich into a smaller home in upstate Connecticut. Court records show he was ordered to complete a 12-session diversity education program. He attended every session. He sat in the back row. He finished it in complete silence. Victoria Anderson filed for divorce 4 months after the gala. In her deposition, she testified that Gerald had used racial slurs routinely and without hesitation in private for decades. She stated she had remained silent out of financial dependence, not agreement. The court awarded her $180 million. She relocated to Palm Beach, cut all ties with the Anderson name, and never spoke publicly about the incident again. Tyler Anderson was confirmed as permanent CEO following a unanimous board vote. Under his leadership, Anderson Capital established a minority business incubator funding 12 black-owned startups in its first year. He hired the company's first black executive vice president, Carolyn Edwards, who had been rejected twice during Gerald's tenure. Anderson Capital's stock recovered within 18 months and reached an all-time high, surpassing even the peak under Gerald's leadership. When a reporter asked what changed, Tyler gave an answer that became its own headline. The leadership. Everything else was already there. Patrice Shaw Anderson continued working at Mercy General Hospital. She was promoted to head pediatric nurse 8 months after the gala, a promotion her supervisor openly called overdue by 2 years. She and Tyler bought a home in Westchester, 4 bedrooms, a backyard with a swing set, modest by Anderson standards, perfect by theirs. Patrice never gave a single interview about the gala. Her only public statement remained those 7 words, "My patients need me." That hasn't changed. Cornelius Shaw retired from Shaw Northfield the following spring. The company reinstated its contract with Anderson Capital under Tyler's leadership, with new terms requiring annual diversity audits. Cornelius now splits his time between the Grace Shaw Foundation and his granddaughter. He picks Zoe up from school on Tuesdays. They get ice cream at the same shop every week. He tells her stories about her grandmother Grace, about her courage, about her kindness, about the cases she fought that changed people's lives. He makes sure Zoe knows exactly where she comes from. Harold Whitfield resigned from Anderson Capital quietly and joined a mid-size firm in Boston. He never once commented publicly. Dorothy Mitchell became the only Anderson family member to maintain a relationship with Tyler and Patrice. She visits every month without fail. She always brings something small for Zoe. It is the most honest apology she knows how to give. And Gerald Anderson sits today in a house in upstate Connecticut that is significantly smaller than the one he lost. No staff, no security team, no gala invitations, no one calling to ask his opinion on anything. He has not spoken to Tyler in over a year. The last known photograph of him shows a man at a court-ordered diversity seminar, sitting in the back row of a community college classroom, wearing a visitor badge clipped to his shirt, learning the kind of basic lessons about human dignity and respect that most decent people understand by the age of 5. So here's my question for you. If you were in that ballroom, standing among those 300 guests, and you watched Gerald tear into Patrice, would you have been Dorothy, sitting in silence with tears running down your face? Or would you have been the one person in the room who stepped forward and said something? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to know. If this story made you feel something, anger, satisfaction, hope, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe if you haven't, because more stories like this are coming. One last thing. Remember this. The way you treat people when you think no one important is watching, that's who you actually are.
Here's what I want you to remember. If someone loves you, really loves you, they won't ask you to change. They won't ask you to shrink. They won't treat you for money or approval or sit at somebody's table. They will stand up. They will tear up the paper. They will walk out the door with you. And they won't look back. That's real love. Not the kind that's come with conditions. Not the kind that disappears when the things get hard. The kind that says, I choose you over the money, over the name, over everything. And if you are the person being told you are not enough, not rich enough, not good enough, not the right color, not the right background, hear me. The problem was never you. It was always them. The right people don't need you to prove your worth. They already say it from day one. Like, share, and subscribe. Real stories, real justice every week. And remember, the people who love you for real don't ask you to earn it. They just love you. And that's worth more than any inheritance on earth.